parent presentations that we will have this year. And they're all going to be focused on building and supporting successful students. All of our programs will be. The presentation topics that we'll be doing throughout the year have been decided on in a committee that focused on providing parents with resources to help students' social and emotional health. Tonight we have, and we used that information from the parent surveys that went out from each campus sent out a parent survey. And so we used the information from that to come up with the topics that we thought would benefit the families. And so tonight we have Artis Lowe and Sarah Feuerbacher, and they're going to be talking about stress and time management. Artis and Sarah are both members of the Parent Education Committee, and they are also local therapists in our area. So the presentation is being recorded, and we will be posting it to our website. So if you like it and you want to share it out or let your friends know, it's out there for them to see as well. We're excited to hear what Artis and Sarah have for us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if I talk loud, can everybody hear me? Or is that bad for the audio back there?
It's fine.
Okay, I read it. For me, that's more comfortable, yeah. But if at any point, because sometimes I can like turn my volume down when I start talking, so tell me. So
Just imagine you speak nicely.
Yeah. I'm curious because we're a small group. I love to have group interaction because it's more enjoyable and you guys are going to remember things more too when you're a part of what we're talking about. But it helps, I think, Sarah and I both in kind of having an idea of your family makeup. Like what age kiddos are we talking about here? If everyone in here has 3-year-olds, right, the way that we talk is going to be different than if like I have an 18-year-old. So it helps me. So maybe like raise your hand if you have kids in high school. Okay, a good selection. Middle school? And then elementary? Any preschool? Okay, so we're all school age. Any out of high school? I didn't ask that.
This question.
Freshman in college. Okay, so we have kind of young adult down to elementary. Okay, that's helpful. We're going to introduce ourselves. I just jumped in. I don't know how to use this. Let's see how this works. I think we're not.
Do it. All right.
All right. So we're just going to kind of introduce ourselves so you know who we are a little bit. It's funny that I was looking up there like I don't know how to. Who am I? Okay, I have a daughter who's a senior at Rock Hill, and she's been here since kindergarten, so we've been in Prosper quite a while. And then I have a son who is a sophomore at PHS, so we're in the divided household. We cover lots of territory that way. And then we have a sweet dog who's been part of our family all that time. And I am, like she was saying, I'm a counselor. I work in a private practice in McKinney, and I work with all ages. But I do see a lot of kiddos who want to play therapists. So, but with kids come adults. So I work with everyone. Your turn.
So I was trying to think about this morning. Artis and I have known each other since, forever, I feel like. And I did not live in Prosper when we first met. And I remember in the context that I had met her, we were all sharing, something about us. And the thing that Artis shared is she said, I'm from a little town called Prosper. And I remember in my head, I was like, I've never heard of that town. That must be somewhere, like East Texas or, someplace. I lived in Dallas. And fast forward all of these years and literally just, I think it was last weekend. It was literally this past weekend. My boys played baseball, and we were at a baseball tournament, and somebody said, y'all are from Prosper, right? That's in Oklahoma. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was me. That was so me, connected to Artis. I always thought of Artis as the girl that's from the P-town by Oklahoma. But yes, here I am, and we reconnected very, very quickly once I moved back up here. And we love presenting together. We've stayed in touch all of these years, and we're like everybody else, where it's not like we talk to each other on a daily basis, although I know, we're kindred spirits and we would love to, but we're busy, we're stressed, we're anxious. And I was joking when I said, I'm going to come up here and stand right here and say, you'll see me out in the community. We both live in the community. So when you watch me out there, just do opposite of what I do, and then you won't be stressed. You know? But anyway, so I've got two boys. They call me Ma. Like, we literally live in the country, you know, with cows and hay bales, and they call me Ma. And all of that important stuff. I own Counseling Care Prosper. That's right there, very close to Texas AMS and Access. There are several counseling practices right there, and I am one of them. We still need more people. I know you probably experience this, but I turn people away, you turn people away on a daily basis because we just don't have enough capacity to meet all of the needs of our growing community, unfortunately. Both Artis and I have left our business cards on your chairs. If you didn't get one, please feel free to ask either one of us. We are not the end-all be-all of counselors, I'll say that for sure. I know we're both really awesome, but we want to make sure that we get you the right fit for your child or for your family, so if it is not either one of us, I promise you we will work with you to help you find the right person for you. But we're just a resource among the many that are out there. And this is what life looks like pretty much 24/7. That is on a daily basis, laundry happening with this guy right here. But you know, you do it because you love him, right? And I know that's one of the questions that we got people sending in. You know, my kids are in sports 24/7, and could that cause them stress? Well, yes it can, because it's causing my boys stress too, and at the same time they love it. So what's the balance, right? And so we're here to talk about that today. When you love your kids and they love what they do, it's just too much of it. Where is the balance with that?
I found this and I thought, just on the tail of what Sarah was saying, right? That just because we work in mental health doesn't mean that we do everything perfectly. And because I know what stress management is, I manage it expertly. No, I'm human. And my life is busier than I would want it to be. And I haven't done all the things I could do to change that, but here we are, right? So we want to be genuine with you in all of this. And I thought, oh yeah, I'm sure this is what we all had tonight. This peaceful, quiet meal, right? Where I anticipate it may have looked a little bit more like this for many of us, right? That like every time I drive, I see people eating in the car. I ate my banana, which is my breakfast, in the car today. So again, I want to be genuine, but I realize that this is a true picture. You too. You too? Okay. It's like group, right? I'm Artis. I ate my car today. But I thought on that note that if you guys are comfortable, a way to help I think oftentimes because we are busy and stressed, we're in our head a lot, right? And it's hard for us to kind of get down into the heart work. And a lot of what we're talking about tonight is this combination of head work and heart work. So I want to try to help us shift gears from the whatever it was that you were doing all day and before you got here and feeling rushed, getting here by 6:30. So we're going to do a little guided meditation. I'm going to do one through YouTube so we can all participate in it. And it's just a 1 minute, right? I'm not going to do an hour of this with you. But to give us an example of little snippets, oftentimes we think, especially in our community, things have to be done big and perfectly, and I don't think that's an accurate perception. Maybe I don't know how to do the volume. You gotta just hold that thought. We may not have volume, and that's fine. Does anybody know?
I just got Miss Brantley.
Okay, man, you're magic. You like popped out of that corner over there. I don't know how to do audio. I didn't tell you that. I needed to do audio. But if it's a pain, no worries. No, we're going with it. Okay, so.
I always will say, when I go and present, I'm a much
Vacation
better
practice
person
to be
and
done
mom and
anytime.
partner for a couple of days, because it's right there in my head, and then, you know, I regret it, but I love to present, because I level up for a little bit.
I'm not sure. How do I use it? Maybe I just didn't know how to use it. You have to turn it on. That helps. Technology is not my forte.
Any place. body in this moment and the sensations of your body touching the chair or the ground. Now guiding your awareness to your breath. Breathing in, rest with the sensation of the in-breath. Breathing out, rest with the sensation of the out-breath. Breathing in, breathing out. Meeting your experience with acceptance, friendliness, and curiosity. If a thought arises, simply note thinking and return your attention to your breath. Breathing in, breathing out.
Thank you guys for letting us start with just a place of calm to help transition from the hecticness that our days might start with and end with. Oh, I still don't know how to use it. Thank you. I think it's important the way Sarah was talking about that we are both from Prosper. We obviously are all in Prosper if we're here tonight. And I feel like our community and the fact that my kids have been here throughout school for both of them, it's a pretty close-knit community. It's growing rapidly, so that's changing a little bit. But with that, I think we have a fairly high-educated community and a high-drive community, and that's not a negative thing. However, it can come at a cost, and I feel like that drive sometimes we might see a higher stress in the community such as ours. We have a lot of focus on GPA, class rank, and I'm not dissing the school or the school district, but there's this sense of competition and pressure, and where's the fine balance, right? The competition and pressure isn't all bad, but how do we find that balance where I can use that as a drive and not get pushed over the top? Thank you, that's my sign. Okay, what is stress? I think maybe you guys throw words out at me. Whenever I say stress, what pops up for somebody? Anxiety? Overloaded. I'm a very physical person, like I'm a high energy person. Like for me, when I think stress, like I have a lot of physical sensations that come up, and it's like tummy, chest, which really goes with, overloaded anxiety. And so we put this in here just to kind of help us understand stress in and of itself, right, is not a negative thing. If I walk out of this building and I cross the road and a car is about ready to hit me, I need my stress response to say, wake up, watch out for yourself, right? So we need it to survive. So many times I think it gets a bad rep because we only talk about it when it's the bad stress, right? Distress. We even use the word stress. What we really should be using is distress, because we're talking semantics. But it's when we kind of feel like that car is going to run over us all the time, right? The lion's always chasing us, is when we're in a more clinical state of that anxiety from the overload, when it's too much. I had to go out to my car because I forgot my fun friends. I did tell you I work with kids a lot too. I think it's important, I was just sharing with Sarah, I have a little 6-year-old that I see who's had some really stressful events that have taken place in her life, which is why she's in counseling. And I use these animals to be able to teach her fight. That is not fight, this is fight. Fight, right? And if with this little dog, he looks pretty relaxed and chill, where you can squeeze and she loves this one so much because we are all of these, right? We have fight, flight, freeze like a possum, and fawn is one that's maybe not as commonly heard about in society. Fawn is kind of the response that has been coined more from trauma work, which is think of someone maybe who grew up in a home that was a very abusive or very chaotic home, and they've learned if I do nice things, if I please, then I'm safe, right? And he doesn't yell at me if I do what I'm supposed to do to an extreme level. So that's what fawn represents. But being able to have an understanding of what our nervous system does for us is important because we all have our ways, right? You guys can probably all think about when you're stressed, how you might respond. But when we get stuck in one of those, it can be concerning, right? It can be debilitating. Okay, this is really wordy. I'm not going to read it to you guys. I'm going to let you chew on it. But I think it's important that whenever we think about the stress process and what happens to our bodies during a eventful situation that is stressful, right? That there's many things that can cause us stress. It can be environmental, like the little girl I talked about, there's a big thing in her life. It could be psychological, it could be social stresses. And also all of these factor in to how our body is going to appraise what is happening right now. What do I need to do to respond to this, right? And we're gonna have physiological, like me, I'm telling you, I really, like I feel it in my tummy, behavioral, people close to my life, probably like friends, maybe not as much, but my family would say I get irritable, prickly, like when I'm stressed, I'm short. I'm just like, I don't want to talk, right? So that's my behavioral response. Emotional, I also am more of a, like, I kind of want to be by myself or with my dog and not around people, so that's how I respond. And cognitive, what are the thoughts that I'm saying to myself, right? What is that negative self-talk? What's happening in my brain when I'm feeling stressed? Is anyone in here, would anyone in here identify with being a type A personality? It's not negative, right? You're like, raise your hand and try. Come on, right? Dude, personality, and it's so funny. Like, I'll talk to people about like introversion and extroversion. I love like watching the couple back there. There's like dynamics, like, oh, you should raise your hand, right? Oftentimes when you hear this, people are like apprehensive to respond, right? But we all have our personality types, like own who you are, but it helps us to be mindful of a type A personality does tend to have more stress in their life. Why do you think that is? Would any type A like to speak up about that?
And there are probably a lot of us in this room because you're actually here.
Yes,
Like,
I was
that's
thinking
just-
Yeah, you get stuff done, right? It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with like, I see the hill, and this would be my daughter, be type B. She's very introverted too, and that doesn't always have to go together in that way, right? But she's a high-performing student. She's good at what she does, but she's also good at it in her time, her pace, right? Where I'm kind of like, well, like, we could have been working on that already. Like, we could have had the tools we needed to get over the mountain, right? So it gives us drive for a type A personality, but it comes at a cost. Yeah, that sense of urgency, that's something that's very familiar to me. I'll take ownership over that. All right, this is nothing I don't think that any of us don't know. And I think we're seeing more and more research, and I don't think it's just because I work in this field. I think all of us are seeing more and more like these negative health effects of stress has on us as humans, right? The physiological toll is, I just think it would be shocking, right, for our like ancestors to come back and see the stressors that we're trying to live with, and saying yes to everything. It's taking a toll on our health. So we're going to talk not just about what is stress, but we all live in a world that has stressors in it. That is life, that is human, right? And some of us might walk more towards some and some not. But what do we do about it is part of what we're going to talk about tonight too. Okay, that's just reiterates kind of what I was just saying. But it makes me sad whenever I see it, because that is such a, and that's not even a full list, quite honestly, like if I walk into my doctor's office and I have high blood pressure and illness, I've gained a lot of weight since last time, I'm having GI trouble, I can't sleep, I've got these rashes, that seems alarming, right? I'm like, I'm really sick. And that can all happen because of stress, like something that sometimes can be in our control and sometimes can't, right? So stress can be placed on us, like that environmental cause, but what can we do about it? There are times that we need to take action because it truly shortens our life. I sidebar a lot, you remember that? But I had a dialogue with a dietitian last week, and she works with a lot of kiddos as well too. And I think we've all heard a lot more about like how gut health, right? And how our gut, like the chemical connection between our brain and our gut and stress. She was saying what an increase of demand therein since the pandemic as well for tummy issues which they've figured out is stress. So itty bitties, right? And you guys probably see it, especially in school. Normally, like what takes us to the nurse's office is I have a tummy ache. And sometimes it's just good old fashioned, I'm sick, I have a tummy ache. But more times than not, people coming through our doors that are littles, they're coming because they have a tummy ache because of stress. So these are things with that. Oh, can anybody relate with that? I feel just kind of like,
So about
what'd you say?
It's so about
Yes. We can all relate with this. I shared with you guys even how I see my responses, right? That for me it would definitely be irritability and hypervigilance. Our body deteriorates, our mind deteriorates the more stress we're under. Right? Look at our stroke rates, look at our heart attack rates, and I think there's definitively a connection there. And so I'm not trying to preach at you guys, but just help us be mindful. Like, well, why does it matter? Like, I need to make enough money to feed my kids, so I've got to work, and then I'll say yes to that next job, but at what cost, right? So listen to our bodies. That's easier said than done, I would have to say. Oftentimes it's, tomorrow, I'll attend to it tomorrow. But when we're so tired that if I, sit down for 5 minutes, I'm going to be asleep, that's concerning for all of us. Oh, this is your turn.
Thank you. You're writing down things, I want to make sure I don't forget.
I'm sorry, you want me to
No,
write it down?
you're good. You guys, I'm going to be honest with you, when I was in school and they, we had to take the neuroscience classes, I still to this day have my neuroscience book, and it is full of doodles because it was so boring and I didn't care one bit. I wanted to work with people. I didn't care what was in their brain and the little cells, and I did not care one bit. And I colored in every E, every O, like that's, you open the book and that's what it looks like. Don't remember a thing from it. But now when I'm doing the actual work, this stuff is like, it makes all the sense in the world. Maybe that's why they're trying to teach me, right? But all of that being said, I'm going to give y'all the utmost respect. This is about me. I'm going to dumb it down for me, not about y'all. I'm going to dumb it down for me because that's what makes sense to me. I've drawn a chocolate chip cookie here. It's not a chocolate chip cookie, this is a brain, okay? But this is our brain with its little brain cells in it, okay? Every single brain cell has what's called, and is anyone in here a doctor or that actually does this kind of work? Yes! All right! I'm the expert now. No one's going to question me. So every single, this is the largest word I'm going to use right here. Everyone has a neurotransmitter or a synapse. Those are my fancy words right there. That's it. We won't give more technical than that. But basically, it's a walkie-talkie. That's all I'm talking about. Our brain cells each have a little speaking piece to it, and also one that can receive, and it's like a walkie-talkie. And it is identical to a walkie-talkie in that if Artis and I were communicating with our two walkie-talkies and we were both holding down that button, kids today don't know walkie-talkies. I'm going to make the assumption y'all are around my age and you played with walkie-talkies, right? If we're both pushing down the button to talk, what happens? We can't hear. Oh, I love y'all. I used this analogy with a kid the other day, and I said, knowing is half the battle. Nothing. Go, Joe. Nothing. G.I. Joe. Nothing. Oh. I mean adults. But all of that being said, same thing. So each little neurotransmitter that is communicating like that walkie-talkie button, it can only send off one message at a time to the next one. Does that make sense to everybody? So it can only send off one hormone at a time. It cannot start shooting off multiple hormones at a time. Only one can be sent. Now I'm going to show you guys what these two hormones are. Let's say this little purple right here. This is what Artis was talking about with this neutral idea of stress, right? It's our stressors are the things that happen in the outside world. That's the external events. Stress is our body's response to stressors, okay? And again, just like what Artis was saying, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. Our brains originally, back in the day when our brains were made, They were created to be able to handle stress through fight, flight, freeze type responses, right? These little guys up here. In short bursts, cortisol, otherwise known as adrenaline, this is a good thing, just like what Artis was saying, right? It keeps us from, I saw a little guy this morning, and he was telling me about biking with a buddy in Irwin Park this past weekend, and he said they got lost, and he's in 4th grade, so they're pretty young. They got lost in the woods, and a guy came by and said, "Do y'all want me to take you out of here?" And they needed help going out of there, but he said, he was telling me this morning that he just didn't feel really comfortable. And the guy took him to an area where there was a parking lot and a car was pulling up real slowly. And then it dawned on this 4th grader, maybe they're working together. Oh, I'm so proud of him, right? This is his little brain firing off those stress responses. And I was like, what were you going to do? And he said, well, everything worked out okay. It was just fine. He took us out and he was a nice guy. And I said, but what were you going to do if your brain in that moment was right? And he said, I was ready. My friend had a little orange bike and I was going to yank him off the bike, pick up the bike, throw it at the guy and say, run. And there was a fence and we could have hopped that fence, and he was an older guy with bad knees. So he played all this thing out, right? He was this guy, right? He was ready for it. He was a fight guy. And here's the thing, he was ready to punch for sure, but fight doesn't mean this all the time. Fight, the other word is action. Some people are doers. Type A people are doers, right? Flight, these people are, I came up with a word, this is the only one that, freeze people are in action. And I had the best word for this the other day. Hang on, give me a second. It wasn't redirection, but that's another way to say it. It had the word action in it, and I was so proud because they all had action, but it'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, this is what we're talking about. Flight is redirection, right? And then freeze is just inaction. There's not one that is better than another. It's not like we get to choose in the moment. It's just what our brain automatically responds in that certain situation. And here's the thing, you guys. Our brains were only meant to have short bursts of this. Our brains were not created at a time when we had social media going. Whoever made our brains did not live in Prosper, Texas, where everyone is checking skyward 24/7, right? Parents and kids alike. Do you get what I'm saying? Our society, our even community is very, very, very different from, I liken it to Survivor. If anyone has watched Survivor and you watched any kind of like behind the scenes stuff, all the contestants are like, yeah, you literally watched 30 minutes of our day. And they put that into a show, but that 30-minute segment is when we do all the action, and the rest of the time we're just throwing coconuts at each other, laying on the beach. We don't do anything. That's really the way that brains were supposed to function. Does that make sense to everyone? So basically, we've screwed up our brains, because here's what happens. This cortisol that is being fired, and again, we're talking very simplistically here. Let's say this little guy right here is in charge of eyes. This little guy is in charge of, throat. This guy right here is in charge of nose. Again, very simple. Don't go and say, the human brain based upon what I'm showing you right here. But we're shooting off cortisol, and guess what happens? When we have short bursts, our eyes get bigger and we're watching for things. Our nose can smell things. If you work with someone in trauma, they're very hyper aware of different senses that happen in that moment. Does that make sense? Like they're super honed in on, I smelled fresh bread before this happened. I worked with someone who has dissociative disorder. She's a 60-year-old. She was very much assaulted when she was a child, and it was linked to being in the kitchen and fresh bread, and that's all she remembers. All of that being said, each one of these has a different role, right? But here's what happens. If we live in chronic cortisol or chronic stress, It shoots off all the time. And this thing that's supposed to save us actually becomes poison in our brains. And instead of saving us, it oversaturates our brain cells. And our brain cells, imagine it's like a sponge, and it's soaking it in constantly. What is that sponge that ultimately was supposed to clean things up for us? What does a sponge do? It gets so heavy, and then it's just worthless at that point, right? And so it literally, the thing that was supposed to save us becomes a killer. And it truly, research has proven, it kills off brain cells. So let's say these are the ones that were killed. Well, I wake up in the morning without having gotten enough sleep from a stressful night the night before, and I have to put red eye in my eyes. And my throat's scratchy. And my nose starts to drip. That's why doctors say get enough sleep. It's not solely medical, it's our brain. Our brains need more rest to decrease the cortisol, to be able to keep our brain cells working actively. Does that make sense to everyone? And again, like, this is why it fires me up so much, because it makes sense now to me. Here's the thing, if we're in chronic stress like this, and they're not hibernating, you guys, they are dead. These brain cells are dead. So when you hear the term, he's not firing on all cylinders, that's literally what's happening. And our kids, back on the slide that says burnout, we're thinking about us, oh yeah, I know that. But we're talking about our 12-year-old, our 17-year-old. We're not talking about middle age where we've been working all our lives forever. We're talking about our kids experiencing this, and we're asking them to fire on all cylinders at all times, from the crack of dawn till late at night, to get it all done. And then they're lazy if they don't. Right? And here's the thing, here's the way it's supposed to work. It is supposed to be that once we have this little short burst, thank you. Once we have this short burst that's supposed to save us, then what's supposed to happen is this naturally decreases because we don't need it anymore. And what will start to increase over here is called oxytocin. And if you look at this word oxy at the beginning, think oxygen, right? The prefix is the same. Oxygen breathes life into. It resets, it refreshes. And that's quite literally what oxytocin does from a brain that has been filled with cortisol. It wipes out all of the poisons and it resets everything. You guys, the coolest thing is that oxytocin is love. I'm not just making this stuff up, this is real. Oxytocin is the love hormone. Love wipes away all of the stress. How cool is that? Our brains are so cool. And I do want to backtrack real fast and say this is the way that this is supposed to work in our brains, but if we are constantly operating out of chronic stress, this never goes. So here's the thing. You may love your partner, you may love your children, you may love your work, you may love yourself, but you cannot feel love, because remember it's a walkie-talkie and you only get to fire one thing. You cannot feel love if your brain is firing cortisol. You cannot feel love genuinely if you're stressed. It's only words, it is not real. If that doesn't really hold us accountable, I don't know what does, right? Do you feel very vulnerable right now? Because I do too. And here's the thing, you guys. This, back to that slide that showed our body, impacts everything. That's what I was writing down here. Did you know that they've gotten new research that links stomach, belly fat to cortisol? Not because of the cookies that we ate last night from Tips Treats. Not that was, I didn't have that experience, but it's not because of that. So keep on eating them. When you're like, oh, I work out all the time and it will not go away. It just must be a nope. It's stress level. The person that's got the personal trainer because they're in Hollywood, no, it's not because maybe because they have liposuction, but still, it's not because of that. It's not because they've got a trainer. It's because they've got time. They don't have those stresses that we have. They have different ones, but do you see what I'm saying? Cortisol also, it's so interesting, it's linked to the heightened autoimmune disorders that are popping up all over the place. Everyone and their dog has an autoimmune disorder now. Well, guess what autoimmune disorders are all about? Stress. Kelly Clarkson had multiple autoimmune disorders and she got rid of them. It's not just something that starts and you can't get rid of. Some people can't. But she got rid of all of hers because she decreased stress. It's when she went off the radar and she had nothing to do with anybody and she got rid of all of them. It's about stress. It's about cortisol, and that's what's pumping through in our brains. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, let me see. You get why kids are sick more often, and again, when a doctor says get more sleep, it has nothing to do with that all of a sudden miraculously making the snot go up their brains. It has everything to do with, and I didn't get to that, it has everything to do with, here's the coolest thing about our brains. If and when, even if we live in chronic stress, if we can somehow decrease our cortisol and naturally then start to uptick things that make us feel relaxed, guess what happens to these completely dead, research-based brain cells? The oxytocin, the love, breathes new life into them, and they are quite literally resurrected from being dead. And they do get to fire on all cylinders. How cool is that? How cool is that? And that's the thing, you guys, it cannot happen unless we slow down. That's the only solution. We have to slow down, which means that we all have to slow down because we're all looking at each other going, but if I slow down, but they don't slow down, then I'm left behind. Does that make sense? We have to spread the word to everyone. One more thing. Go ahead and jump to the next one. Is that the next one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know if you
No,
did.
you're good. I think I got everything. Yeah, I think I got everything on there.
It makes me think, it's not to interrupt you, but I was thinking of back in the like March 2020, right, whenever the pandemic hit, and the way so many conversations happened about we slowed down and the increase in happiness for some, and I don't want to discount the stress that was put on in a different way, so I'm really kind of hyper-focused on the slowdown effect that happened in the world, and how you hear people talking about their relationships changing and their ability to absorb being greatly altered. It's just, it is a fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I always will use the analogy over here on oxytocin, and when I say you guys don't love the people in your lives, I don't love the people in my lives, I'll prove it to you. When you go on a trip, and you can't count Disney World, yes, that's a trip, it's not a vacation, right? But think about an actual relaxing trip. Do you all of a sudden feel more love after a couple of days laying on the beach doing jack squat? Do you feel more love for the people around you? Yes. Is it because they're way better in that environment? Maybe. But it's also because they're changing. But truly what's happening inside is your cortisol is slowing down and your brain is starting to fire that oxytocin. So what you're feeling is actually love. Does that make sense to everyone? And when you come back well rested, and to Artis's point, you know, after everyone was just kind of down in the pandemic and not having extracurriculars and everything, that's what happens. Our brains were reset with love. And I'll tell you this too, I know that you're the same way because I'm sending you people and they're coming back and saying, well, Artis was booked, you know, give me more people. Through the roof as far as people on a daily basis asking for services, and I guarantee you it is because not only has school started back up, it started last year, but extracurriculars are full force now. That's the difference maker. Does that make sense? All right, what else do we have here? So speaking of extracurriculars, this is what we're talking about right here. There is a huge rise in anxiety and depression, and those two go hand in hand. That's what I wanted to say about medication. Don't let me forget. Somebody remind me about medication and I'll go back to it. And I'll show you this in a slide here in the future, but if you have prolonged anxiety, and again, prolonged anxiety happens when you have prolonged chronic stress or chronic cortisol. So the chronic cortisol creates the stress and anxiety. The anxiety, too much of that, then creates depression because back here, we have so many brain cells that have died. Does that make sense? That's what depression is if you're thinking mental health. That's what depression is. Anxiety is too much cortisol. This is cool stuff now, right? Like now we understand it. Back to the medication part. I have this sheet, and I had so many clients that would say, you know, Sarah, every single week you give me a new tool. I'm talking about a tool in our tool belt to be able to de-escalate my anxiety in a situation. And, you know, it's great. I work on it for a few days, but by the time I come back around to see you or in the heat of the moment, I forget it, or I try to do it and it doesn't work for me. Well, first and foremost, you have to practice when you're not stressed. Just like in a baseball game, you have to practice before you play the game or you're going to mess up that double play or whatever it is, right? Same thing, you have to practice when everything's just cool, calm, and collected, that skill to be able to then actually pull it in the heightened cortisol time because your brain is already going to not be totally focused on that coping mechanism. Does that make sense? Number two, if we go through, and I probably have 15 to 20 different de-escalation strategies on this little sheet because I wrote them out because people were saying, I just don't remember them. And I said, okay, let's write this thing out. You can hang it on your refrigerator and see it all the time in practice. Wrote this thing out. And I wrote 3 questions at the bottom. And these 3 questions are super important, I think. And I'm not going to remember all of them, but it's only 3, Sarah, but too much cortisol up here right now. But one of them is, did you actually try these strategies? Like for real, did you try them or did you just kind of halfway do them? Number 2 is, when you tried them, if you actually tried them, were any of them successful at all? And if the answer to that is no, then that last question is, I did remember them. Did you feel like your brain is in such fog because of your anxiety that you couldn't even recall what the strategies were when they were right in front of you? If the answer to that is yes, I'm in such a fog that there's no way my brain could even try to use these, that's when I go, okay, now we're talking medication. Does that make sense? Like talking about anti-anxiety medication. It is not for lack of trying. It is that their brain has been so flooded for so long with this cortisol that they can't all of a sudden just decrease it enough to also then have the power to increase the oxytocin. Does that make sense to everyone? The different medications do a couple of different things. There are some that will simply just kind of jumpstart the decrease of the cortisol. So that's some of the medications. There are other medications then that will solely jumpstart the increase of oxytocin. And then there are some that do a little bit of both, just depending on your brain. But I always get that question, what's the difference between the strategies that you're talking about and when those don't help, and when does medication come into play? Does that make sense to everyone? Medication is not always appropriate for a person. And at the same time, I want y'all to see brain-wise, and we're all parents that love our kids or we wouldn't be here, brain-wise, sometimes our kids cannot do it without it. Does that make sense? Just like you wouldn't want them to hop along on a broken leg without it being casted, or trying to read a screen at the other side of the room without glasses if they needed glasses. You wouldn't do that to them, would you? Same thing. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. All right. This real fast. I do want to point out number 2 right here. These incredible students that we have are really smart kids, are cheating not because they're dumb. They're cheating because they are exhausted. They're cheating because they don't have enough time to both excel as a captain in practice and then also study for this test and also study for that quiz. I literally had a girl today, and I guarantee you she's going to be a valedictorian or somewhere up there. But she told me today she was having to choose between 5 tests this week and which one she was having to forgo studying completely because she only had a certain amount of time. 5 tests just this week. And I know that your kids are experiencing the same thing. Real fast, go back real fast. Sorry, Artisan. This right here, if anyone is just wanting to look at extra, this documentary, Race to Nowhere, is excellent. Excellent. Go ahead. Signs of being overscheduled and overstressed. If your child is tired all the time, if they're irritable, if they're bored, without something right there. I'm literally describing my little one, Mikey. Mom, what can I do now? What can I do now? Well, what can I do now? I'm like, there's 2 minutes before we eat. Well, what can I do? Are you kidding? Get a walkie-talkie, man. You know, play like the way we used to play. But that's what we're talking about. And here's the thing: they are the brightest of the bright kids in our community, right? Like, we're doing amazing things with our kids. And at the same time, when you look at those characteristics, are those characteristics of a very bright, wonderful, socially acceptable citizen? No. That's what we are trying to do for our kids, is to teach them how to do that, right? And at the same time, it's polar opposite. Those are the kids that we're creating to unfortunately have low self-esteem because they don't feel good enough. Does that make sense? Tell me when I'm not supposed to keep
Oh, you can keep going.
Okay.
As long as you want.
So we've got to reverse this curse. The problem is the stress, right? And the way that we're handling it, we're seeing it through the lens of distress as opposed to eustress. And eustress, I didn't even know about that word until I started presenting on it. Eustress is literally looking at the exact same thing, the exact same situation that we still, it's a stressor, it's external, we still have no control over, but seeing it through a different lens of not having to be perfect. Or maybe like that girl today going, that's one of the ones I'm just going to have to fail. But it doesn't mean I'm a failure. It just means that grade this time is going to, right? 2 different ways to look at it. So stress, that leads to anxiety, that leads to exhaustion, that leads to burnout, that leads to depression, that leads to failing. That creates situations where we have self-harm or risky behaviors. And it happens like that. It happens just like that. Like I said before, though, we can reverse this. How cool is that? It is simply understanding this over here. This chocolate chip cookie that I dismissed years and years ago, it was important because we are able to now understand how to help our kids change their brains. And we are the solution to that.
You can keep going.
Go for it. So I'll tell you real fast. This is an actual quote. So threat assessments and no harms are the kids that have either said, I have, or I am thinking about hurting myself or somebody else. And this is an actual quote. I would always ask my threat assessments and no harms that they can name an adult that they feel like they could go to or talk to, that they trust. Some could do it and some could not. I'm literally talking about one adult that a child trusted enough to say, I'm struggling, I'm having a hard day, and think about the answer that some children had no one that they could think of to go to.
It's heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. So let me take a pulse on everyone. How's everyone doing? It's a lot of information being thrown at you, and it can also sometimes feel, as parents, as caregivers, right? I'm guessing that some of us in here may have experienced feeling guilty. Oh, I do that, or I've done that, right? And we're here out of support to say we all trip up, but we all have, it's beautiful that the solution is within each of us and how we can model that for our kiddos, right? So harmful reactions to a child's stress brings up for me, oftentimes, right, when our child is stressed, likely there's something going on stressful in the environment, and we're likely stressed as well, and we're probably responding out of our own place of stress. So I think for me, what's most an important take home tonight is, right, we can't pour from the empty pitcher. We have to take care of ourselves as well. Like, we're doing this to help us learn how do we help our kids with stress management and time management. But it really does all start with us, and how do we manage our own, we're role modeling for them, and how do we respond to our kiddos when they are. So many times I'm just thinking of Monday night, a teenager that I was seeing very much struggling with depression, self-harm, and off of Sarah's last one, does anyone listen to her, right? There are multiple people in this life that she knows are there for her, but can they get it, is where she's at, that teen brain. Do they understand, right? And the caregiver's response is, it'll be better tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new day. Yeah.
But I have a question.
Of course.
I made the experience I'm one of, I don't know, I see my daughter has some issues, and I talk to her. I say, how was school? And she comes and she says, boring. Flat out, okay, tell me about it. Boring, that's it. And then, okay, so what was the nicest thing happened to you today? Nothing. So, conversation at home.
Yeah.
And then I get these answers, I'm tired and stuff, you know. So I can't reach her the way I want to reach her. And so I'm trying to find different ways, you know, to kind of, I started because my husband is often out of town. So when he travels, then I take her and say, okay, come on, you sleep with me. Just to give her that she's not alone. Because we work a lot, you know, like probably everybody else too. And that gives us guilt, you know, too. So, and I just try to do my best to be there for her. But it's hard to reach her.
What a beautiful statement that you just kind of ended that with. I do my best to be there, to let her know I'm there. And I hope you don't undersell that. That is significant, because the message you're sending her is mom's here, mom
Yeah.
listens. How old is she?
14.
14. So and what a developmentally typical response, right? Shoot, you can even ask me about my day. Sometimes I'm just tired, right? And there's not enough words to encapsulate the 8 or 12 hours, and it's just kind of like, tired, and I don't really want to open it, but people can see something's not right, I'm worried about her. So don't stop asking. You may find different ways of being with her. I think it's beautiful that when dad travels, oh, this is like our special extra like snuggly time, even though you're a teen, right? That she's walking towards that. If you weren't reaching her completely, she wouldn't walk towards that physical quality time with mom. That is significant. And so there may be, sometimes it's even just in our language, right, of how we interact. If I see Sarah and like, how was your day? It may be a quick response, as opposed to if I approach her and I see her is just heavy. Oh, what a day. And I'm like reflecting what I see on her rather than tell me about your day. And maybe she didn't have anything good in her day, right? Maybe wherever I'm at in my lens in that moment that you asked me because I'm frustrated that I just saw what I saw on my Snapchat, that I can't really think about the good thing that happened at 9 o'clock this morning. It was an eternity ago when you're 14 years old. There's so many social interactions throughout the day, on here and here, right? So being reflective of what you see her, right? Like, oh, school was tough today. Will expand, that will open her up more than a question ever will. Asking questions is about us. And that's not negative, that's not to like induce guilt on any of us, right? But it's me wanting to know because I'm the mom, I want to fix. I want to know, I want to fix. And so rather than having that fixer position, I want to have the I'm here with you, I'll meet you where you're at, and I don't have an expectation for you to be somewhere else. Because oftentimes, tell me the best part of your day. I had a really crappy day maybe, and I just need to kind of sit with that for a minute and need to know that you can offer me that space. Right? I'm thinking of that 15-year-old Monday that I was with, and that's what she's saying. They just don't understand. They just keep saying, and in this family, right, we all have our own belief systems and cultural and generational, all that is just pray about it and it'll get better. And I'm not saying anything negative about prayer, but what she hears is it'll go away. It's not that big a deal. It's what's the solution? She's saying,
I was just going to say,
yeah,
there's no solution.
I'm scared this isn't going to change, right? Or maybe I've been praying for 14 years and I don't see it, so I need something different, something more. Of course.
To back you up on the questions, so often we use the word why because we want to get more information, and why creates defensiveness that shoots up cortisol. Again, going back to the cortisol brain. Instead, if we can replace why with tell me about, fill in the blank, that elicits a completely different brain response. One of the things that my boys and I have just implemented this year And I'll show you how quickly they have picked up on this, even on really bad days. But it's just every single day we do this, even if I see them and we're ships passing in the night, we always will do this. So any of the grumblings about it have disappeared because it is consistent. So much of parenting, we make ourselves or break ourselves with consistency, right? But every day we have done this. We haven't done anything else right probably, but we've done this right this year. But we do 3 positive strengths, even, and oftentimes they'll say, well, I got up today, you know? And that's okay. If that's one of the 3, that's all right. We'll go with that. Mikey's today my lunch was pretty good. It was corny dogs and they didn't run out before I got in line. All right, that's a strength, right? Last time I thought he's going to beat somebody up because they ran out right in front of him. But you know, yes, sir.
Tools, I think you guys are talking about tools. One thing that we do, and I'm going to look back at Ms. Hobson, I'm going to still call you Ms. Hobson, but, so we do a thing sometimes where we go and we're sitting at the dinner table, looks exactly like that first picture that you showed.
Yeah.
But we do I don't know if maybe this is stupid and y'all can laugh, but like the rose, the thorn, and the bud.
Yeah.
Do y'all, because that tends to promote the child to be creative and to think the good, the bad, and what can come from it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was going to say, so we start with the 3, then we move to the 2 of the challenges. So the thorn, exactly that. What are 2 challenges? And even on an awesome day, I want to hear them come up with challenges because there always is something, even on an awesome day. And then, like what you were saying, we always have a goal, and the goal can be about today or it can be about tomorrow. It can't be beyond that, like Mikey's tonight, and it was literally passing, I'll see you guys tonight, you know, get in bed, and, you know, make sure it's showered. And, as I'm running out, but his was, I'm going to have fun. And it's because they're home by themselves tonight. Well, that was his goal, and I hope he accomplishes it, you know. But all of that being said, this is how quickly kids take to this. I pulled up last Thursday and got my son, who's in middle school, and he hops in, and then this kid off of his baseball team hops in the car too, and I'm like, well, hey, buddy. And he said, well, hey, Coach Sarah, and I was like, I mean, I had no idea what was going on. And I said, does your mom know you're in here? And he said, she's on the phone with me right now. Yeah, Mom, she knows. Okay, bye. And so, like, that's what happened. And so we're driving, and I'm like, okay, boys, what were 3 good things about your day? Well, this little guy literally hops in there first. He's never done this in his life. And he's like, well, I had 3 good things, and, you know, two bad things. Kids want guidance. But the open-ended can be so big, just like what Artis was saying. And don't ask me how this presentation went, right? Like, I'll tell you, good, I'm tired. But specifically ask me, Sarah, what were 3 good things about it? Well, we had a really participatory exchange with the people in there, and they all, like, every once in a while smiled at us. And I got to see Artis, you know, my 3 good things. What were 2 challenges? Well, it was windy, right? But again, that consistency and giving some sort of, that's why kids in bowling alleys have bumpers. They need lanes, right? They need a lane, they need bumpers to know which direction to go.
No. So we do highs and lows at our dinner, so it's a little bit different. But even like all my kids who are 16 and 18, their friends know when they join us for dinner, because I'm not going to speak around you. You're a guest in our home, but you're eating at our dinner table. So we dialogue together. What were 3 highs about your day and 3 lows about your day, right? And again, it's that being able to, there are always highs and lows, but sometimes, thinking of your 14-year-old, we can't get to our, sometimes we can be, depending on that cortisol level, right, so down. It is. The lens of which we're looking through is only seeing the lows, right? So it's us monitoring, having that consistency.
And I'm so glad you said that, because I meant to say this too. We also have the ability, part of the rules is if you don't feel like answering then, you can answer any time at all between now and when you go to sleep. So they have the ability to back up if they're a distancer at that time and not answer at that time. They just know sometime in between when we pick them up and when they go to sleep, we're going to hear about their day. Yep.
It's such a beautiful way to be able to enter into our kids' worlds, right? And for them to enter into ours too, right? That we share about ours as well. So that we're again modeling and showing our humanness, right? Our kids, I mean, I'm pretty sure my kids have known I'm human and make errors since the get-go. There's been plenty along the way.
And I'll tell you too, to that point, I've learned more about my husband just in doing this little silly activity. It's so silly and small, but truly, like, I have learned more about him since August, whatever, 11th, that we went back to school. If that's not saying anything, just from doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were you done with this one?
Sure. It worked for me. I think I could have jumped in. I think we've intermingled. I hope that's okay. This is a cartoon, I guess that's what we call it, that I love because I hear this time and time again from kids I work with, right? Like, she just doesn't get it. Like, you were just fine yesterday. You were so happy. You got so much done, right? But now I'm flooded and I'm stressed. And it's that whole message of meeting them where they're at, right? If this is my daughter and I'm at home and I see her like that, and my brain tells me yesterday she was like Miss Chipper, right? The fixer in me may want to be like, oh, I want yesterday's kid to be back. That was a lot easier, and I like that one a little bit more. It's easier to interact with. But reality is, she's there tonight. So that's where I'm going to go, right? Rather than trying to pick them up by bootstraps and, better days tomorrow. And man, that must be so exhausting to know like yesterday was such an exciting day and today was so heavy, can't even get up. Just stopping with that. So then what they're hearing is, this person notices me, right? They see me and they're accepting me for where I'm at, not expecting me to be perfect. So how's that GPA? What's your class rating today? Right? No, this is where I'm at today. No expectations. I'm gonna let you speak to this one.
Yep.
Yeah.
The thing is, you guys, what Artis was just describing is all about trust, right? Can our child trust us? And it is a reciprocal two-way street when it comes to trust. Children become exactly what we talked about with the cortisol when there is distrust. And the only way, going back to that threat assessment, the only way that children are able to work their way out of the stressors that are naturally going to happen is if they're able to trust an individual in their life to be able to talk to. And here's the thing, you guys, there may be points in your kids' lives where it's not you. It doesn't mean that you're not doing your best. It doesn't mean that they don't love you. It just may mean that they need someone separate to be able to verbally vomit on. And that's, that's a counseling term that we use, and Artis and I are used to getting verbally vomited on every single day. It's our job, but that's where somebody like a counselor or a mentor or, whoever, a coach or somebody, that's where it is really nice to make sure that your child, we don't take it personally, we just make sure that your child has somebody at that point in their life, because it's going to change over time.
And it makes me kind of think too on the and I'm probably my lens, right, when I think about parenting is the fact that I do have a senior in high school, so I'm very, aware of that. Oh, she may live in the house soon. I think it's beautiful for our kids to know that we aren't the only ones, right? That's a dangerous situation to only have one person in your life, be it a parent, be it a partner, or that can set up for a dangerous path in life if I only have one person of trust. So it's a beautiful part, ritual, what's that, right? Passage, that's what I'm trying to find, right? That my 18-year-old needs to know there are other people in the world that she can and needs to turn to, not just us. I think that it's a tool that we want for them as they age. But it can't, not to say it can't be hard, right? When how many conversations we both had with parents of, they just don't talk to me anymore, right? They used to tell me, we used to snuggle in bed when Dad traveled. Now I can't even get her to come down out of her room, right? That's a more place.
And here's the thing, you guys, you can look at each one of these bullet points right here. I love, I guess it's the fifth one on there, fourth one on there. Mikey is such a perfectionist. I mean, it's his kryptonite for sure. My youngest one, and to the point, and he finds every loophole in pre-K. his teachers were talking to them about bodies of water, and they were talking about lakes and rivers and streams, you get the point, and they wanted the kids to draw whatever body of water they picked. And Mikey hands me his when he gets in the car, and it's a sheet of paper, and there's one blue dot on it. And I'm like, what is this, Mikey? And he said, it's my body of water. And I said, what is it, Mikey? And he said, it's a drop out of the hose. I mean, this is the kind of boy we're talking about, right? But it was the drop out of the hose. He found the loophole. So A, he could finish before everyone else. B, that's who we deal with. B, because no one else had that idea. C, because he didn't mess up, right? Like, if he had drawn a big lake, he would have messed up somewhere in there, but you can't mess up a dot. Does this remind you of any, like, maybe your 18-year-olds, right?
16-year-old.
Yeah, there you go. So when you think about that, and you're thinking about this idea that mistakes are going to happen, that's who I have worked with. And this little guy I presented last week, and I actually used him as an example. I had some pictures on it. But he was asked, it was this time multiple years ago, probably 3 years ago, and he was asked to do a pumpkin, I hate it, I love you if you're a teacher, but I hate it when teachers do this. It was read a book and then make a pumpkin reflect the main character of that book. And they tell you the night before, you know, so where do I get a pumpkin at midnight, you know? But anyway, so, you know, we get this little pumpkin, and he read Arthur's Halloween, and Arthur dresses up as Superman. So we get out construction paper and all this stuff, and he literally drew one eyeball and stuck it on there, and he was drawing the other one, and it didn't match perfectly, and the papers tore out, you know, and like the Hulk, you know, burst out right there. Mistakes couldn't happen in that little guy's brain. Fast forward, and literally all we worked on in the past 3 years is mistakes are our friends. Mistakes are our friends, right? And he did a poem. And if I don't keep anything of Mikey's, even if he is valedictorian, nothing will make me prouder than this little sheet that he brought home. And it was a poem, and it's of his hand. And he said, my hands are like me. I like my hands. They make mistakes just like me, but they also do a lot of good things. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, you know, I can die now because, you know, Mikey can make mistakes. That's what it's about right there. It's about letting our kids know that mistakes happen, and we make them every second of every day. Also, we're all in it together, and that's how you create reciprocal trust. Be the first one to apologize. Let them know that apologies are not a mean, bad, scary thing. Apologies are just part of every single day life, on a daily basis, on a minute-by-minute basis sometimes, right? Make it be reciprocal, because then all of a sudden you are a trusted person. Because I often told artists and any other people that are learning to be counselors, I would say, when I was teaching at SMU, I was a clinic director there, and I said, they picked me for this job because I make more mistakes than anybody else. Nobody wants to go to a counselor that's perfect. They just don't. Everyone wants to go to a counselor that they can look at and we're like, yeah, that sucks, doesn't it? You know, I've been there before. And that's what our kids want. Our kids want to be able to have somebody look across and go, yeah, that sucks. I've been there before too. How do you think you're going to resolve it? Right? Is it yours?
I have no idea.
This is why I love presenting it. It's like just doing it together. Oh, okay, here we go. This is a direct quote from a Prosper student. I would, this is them, what a Prosper High School student would ask of us as parents. I would ask that they support me being understanding if I mess up or if I can't meet an expectation. Saying you can do it or you got this isn't always the most encouraging. It is not always the most encouraging. It almost adds more pressure on me, making it seem like not having it is not an option. Setting realistic expectations without creating unhealthy pressure around those expectations, and being understandable and empathetic if something doesn't go right is all I can ask of the people around me. And basically what they're saying is, listen to what I need and support me, not my achievement. How powerful is that, right?
That's a wise kid.
Oh, exactly.
Right? I mean, that quote is, I don't know, I hope we all are able to really let that sink in with us, because they know themselves well. You just keep going. I like this.
Okay. The thing is, they look to us. Whether they're whether they're talking to us or not, may not be happening at that moment, but they're looking at us, right? And I can stand up here and talk about how to decrease stress and anxiety, but if my kids see me being frantic all the time, I can't be hypocritical, right? So I have to also every single day go, boys, I gotta work on this. Mikey will now, again, it's Mikey, oh, I love that boy, but Mikey will now look at me and say, Mom, I need you to be counselor, Mom, not Mom. He did that to me the other day, and do you know what that's basically saying? Calm it on down, Sarah, and be the person that you are at work, not the person you are right now. That's what he's calling me out on, right? Be calm counselor, Sarah, that's great at this stuff, not...
And what if we share a trusted relationship,
Right,
Because
exactly.
I can hear that same scenario being said out of maybe another parent's mouth,
Mhm.
and it may be received as like disrespect, or that's not okay to talk to your caregiver that way. And he's saying, Mom, I trust you, and I trust that you can hear this feedback. And what a beautiful picture of the trust instilled in that relationship.
Well, if I'm being really honest, at first I go, excuse me? And then I go, oh, excuse me. You're right.
Right, the natural defensiveness
Yeah,
popped up,
oh, yeah.
right?
I just had to make sure it wasn't portrayed
Where
as
was
just
it?
as beautiful as that. And here's the thing, I'll go quickly here, but parents who wish to train up their children in the way in which they should go must also go that way in which they want their children to. Right? We have to walk that path first to make sure it's okay for our kids. Right?
It's both like a privilege and it's really scary,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But that is the requirement of
Uh-huh.
parenting. It really boils down to
Mhm.
that.
I've often said the role of a counselor is a horrible honor. It's horrible because you're sitting across from somebody that's telling their deepest, darkest fears and secrets, and they are hurting or they wouldn't be there. But it's also the most incredible honor to sit in the room with somebody and have them trust you to be a part of that journey with them. But it's the same thing for everyone in here. It's a horrible honor, right? To not be able to protect our kids from life, but what an honor it is to walk with them in it, right? All right.
Okay, I'll switch.
Go for it.
Yeah. She likes presenting. I do. This is just an example, right, of for us to be that role model for our children, right? How do we talk to ourselves? How do they hear us? Sometimes we talk to ourselves out loud, or maybe that's just me, right? But we all have this ability to switch our negative self-talk into positive self-talk. So like an example, right? Time to relax and slow things down. I can pause if I get uptight or start to notice my cues, rather than what naturally probably is happening in a lot of people's brains, right, with that is, it's too fast, I just can't do it, I gotta do more, I'm underachieving, right, I'm a failure, didn't do it right, rather than, wait, I can give myself time to slow down and relax. And I guarantee you, every one of us have heard our children say these phrases, like that quote from the kiddo that Sarah shared was, hit my heart so much to know that an adolescent might be listening and saying, this is what I need, and I'm not sure why us as parents can't do it. So when we hear our kids going down that spiral of negative self-talk, it's part of our jobs to help them flip that negative self-talk into a positive self-talk. And I can get accused in my life of, this kind of goes back to the G.I. Joe and walkie-talkies and all that, of being a Pollyanna. But I can't say that around kids because it's like, what is that? So being overly optimistic and a positive personality. And that truly is just kind of part of who I am as a person. But I have to keep that in check, right? Because I can't make everything good if someone's depressed, right? And they're down here and I'm meeting with like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to see you too. That's a mismatch, right? But for some people it can come easier than others. And I have to watch. My son, who's 16, is very much like your Mikey. So much so perfectionistic, high anxiety, high drive, awesome kid, right? But he does everything full steam ahead, and that comes at a cost to self. And he's more naturally leans towards a negative self-talk since he was little. right? And sometimes we can kind of almost lock horns where I'm trying to like reframe his negative into a positive. And sometimes even I'm missing what he's saying is, I just need you to meet me where I'm at right now, right? So I want us to all learn how to make positive self-talk, but be conscientious of when and how, right, we're using it. Is it a mismatch for the situation we're having? But I think the best practice of this is to start with ourselves before you try to apply it on your kids. To begin that path, like we're walking down the path with them. But if I'm not practicing for myself, then I'm having that little voice in my head that's kind of saying, even earlier today, I was like, oh, I'm intimidated to present with Sarah. Sarah's such a phenomenal, she's like a natural teacher. Like, no, I know this too, right? We have our different styles, but I had to catch myself in that. So work here before you work out there with your kids. Like encouragement and praise.
I also have to say this, if you're gonna say that about me, that Artis is the person, when I think about who she is as a parent, that's the thing that I want to be like, because I'll never forget Artis's, the family. I had a child, a teenage child in my room yesterday that was talking about her son, and she had no idea that I know Artis. And she's talking about this, the best kid, the best friend, such a quality, upstanding character. They have the coolest family. The parents are super cool. They get out and jump on the trampoline with us and stuff. I mean, like, and they're talking about Artis and her family. And this is the mama that would have in dinners together. She would have theme nights where all of a sudden everyone sits down and she's like, superhero theme night, go. And in 2 minutes, all of the people in their family have to put on superhero costumes and go back down and eat dinner together. So she may like me as a presenter, but I like her as a person.
My husband may disagree with that sometimes. Yeah, the energy levels sometimes don't match. So, on this may, again, seem kind of like with the chocolate chip cookie, right? Like we're kind of like dumbing down, but I think this is so important that when we think about emotions, sometimes like we've all seen, probably many of us have seen like emotion charts. And there are more words to describe emotions than probably my vocabulary can hold. It comes down to our basic core emotions, things that move you inside out, right? It really does boil down to that. So being able to identify core, what is going on with 14-year-old, right? When she gets, I'm not trying to pick on you, but you spoke up, so she's our example, is that identifying what is happening. You're feeling really scared. I'm feeling really sad. I'm really happy today. I want to help all of us as humans have a better attunement to what that emotional response is going on. I think so many of us go through our day not realizing, right, that cortisol has flooded and my gut hurts. My heart is pounding. Like we don't even slow down. What is happening that's causing this sensation? I'm angry about that situation, the road rage, or whatever happened on my way to work right now. But helping us and helping our kids being able to identify the emotions. There's a whole a way of thinking about our brain and our emotions. They call Name It to Tame It with Stan Siegel, right? That does Name It to Tame It. And if you guys could, if you ever Googled him, it's the best. And it really comes down to that helps our brain settle when I can identify what is this experience that I'm having, what is this emotion that I'm having. So being able to, again, model that for our kids and say it to our kids when, right, they're throwing a fit. And, gosh, you are so angry right now. I am angry. Do you know what happened earlier? Rather than, okay, chill, Bill. That's a lot to come in the door with that. Like, go out the door, come back in when you got a better attitude. Right? We've all probably been on both sides of that. So helping them identify. That's right. I see faces like, oh. Were you at my house earlier?
And I'll say this too, I say this like primary colors, and kids can understand this. So if you have little bitties, just do it in this way. Do y'all remember the primary colors that you learned preschool and elementary school? What are they? Red, yellow, blue, right? Does that mean that my green Jeep out there is not real? It's not really a color? Or is green a real color? Still a real color, right? So our emotions are the same way. There are billions of emotions, but there are really only 3 core emotions that create, combinations, create all the other emotions. What do you think those 3 are?
Happy, sad, angry.
And everyone always says those 3, yes. 2 out of 3, yay. But one of them is actually not a core emotion, anger. What do you think it is? Fear. I heard somebody say fear. Think about this. Underneath anger is always either and sadness or pain or fear. Always. Challenge yourself. Think of the last time you were furious, but then dig deep and go, I was either sad about something or in pain about something, or I was scared about something. Always, 100%. And the thing is, possibly like our 2 kids together, Mikey's comes out as, he identified when he watched Inside Out with anger. That was his, because he's an action, he's a fight person, right? And that's what it looks like. And in the moment, if I say, oh, you're so sad, no, I'm not sad, boom, right? He doesn't want me to say, you're so sad there. But if I say, you are so angry, stomp it out. Show me how angry you are. Clap it out. And then he gets it out. And then the next thing, and I swear you guys, this works. I swear. And then the next thing is, oh my gosh, yes. Breathe it out, right? And my guess is too, buddy, you're also really hurting. And then silent tears start to come down. And maybe it's like this. And it's not just my Mikey, this works with anyone, me included, right? But that's how you de-escalate, right there. You meet them where they are, you identify whatever emotion they're experiencing, and then you also peel it back, peel the onion back and find that core, and that's where you can go in there and be able to soften it and move forward.
I'm also aware of time.
Okay.
So I was just like
I'm gonna
thinking.
skip some too.
Yeah, I was thinking of the fact that I'm going to do a really quick wrap up of the difference in encouragement and praise, but I also want to leave time for you guys to be able to interact and ask questions if you have them. But I think this is important because it goes along the lines of everything we've been talking about. Going back to the slide that Sarah was on with the Prosper Kiddo. Like, don't just see my achievement, see me. So how can we do that is the difference in you come here and you show me your handwriting, I'm like, oh, good job. It doesn't really mean anything as opposed to, man, you have been working really hard. You did a lot of notes today. Right? So I'm speaking to the effort that the person did, not the outcome. Because I can give all of you a test, and you're going to perform differently. Not necessarily because you were prepared differently, but because each of us are different and our cognitive abilities are different, right? I can have 2 kids in a classroom that prepared equally for a test, and one can get a C and one can get an A. But if they are preparing the same way, right, no, I need to speak to the work there. You are studying so hard. And you just spent an entire hour studying for that test. You put a lot of work into that, as opposed to, I'm going to give you $10 if you get an A. Then I'm working for external reward, right? Which lowers my self-esteem, it lowers my self-worth because I need from you. Tell me I'm good, tell me I'm pretty, tell me I did good. I need more, rather than I'm going to work really hard. I feel good about myself because I got up and I exercised today. Not how much I did or how hard I did, right? But what did I do in this scenario and how is it recognized? You put a lot of effort into that. And you always show up. A game for every presentation you do, right? Like when you get here, you work hard, your head is here, as opposed to, she's a really good presenter. That doesn't mean anything. Really quantify that. So, just keeping that mindset, right? When kiddos come home and show you what they're doing, how can I respond to them with on the effort that they put in, not on the outcome, right? So that's what I summed that up a lot. So I'm going to time for you guys. These are all really good examples, right? Empowerment or encouragement versus the good jobs. just to give you guys an example.
And if you look there on that list, on the right side with praise, it's I, me. Does that make sense? And over on the other side, it is you. How do you, what do you, tell me about you, right? And the thing is too, that's really hard. We all, when we were kids, we wanted praise, right? Teachers do a whole lot of praise. If we had kind parents, we were hoping for praise. So the left side, the encouragement statements, the empowerment statements, doesn't come naturally. Does that make sense?
It doesn't come naturally, and I can say from sharing about like my 16-year-old who is a high drive, high achieved kid who's grown up with a counselor mom, he has said to me, would you just tell me good job? Like, oh, right? So I don't want to say this is like perfect and beautiful always, right? Tell me I'm good. But that is his biggest struggle, right? Is that external out there. So it doesn't come naturally for our words, and it can be received awkwardly when I've grown up in a society where I need my gold sticker, give me the stamp. My teacher tells me I did good every day. Why don't you tell me good job on this? Right? So it can be met with conflict because it's not what we're used to receiving or hearing.
And that's exactly what Artis is talking about, right? She's talking about her son being able to assess his own life as opposed to looking for the external.
We can keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Let's
gonna
be mindful of everyone's time
No,
too.
it's okay. I'm going to skip through and show you guys this right here. We're talking about the exact same thing as somebody with a core belief right here that says, I'm unlovable, I'm worthless, that then thinks I have to be perfect all the time. I'm an action-oriented person, so I must do. Talking exactly like what Ernest was just talking about. I must do, I must perform. Those type A'ers, right, that climbs that mountain. Underneath, they have to do, because if they don't do, they are worthless. Does that make sense? It is black or white. If they don't perform, if they aren't as perfect as possible, will they still be loved at the same level as they're loved now? So we're talking about the same situation, now looking at it through the lens of de-escalating the cortisol, knowing that mistakes happen, like wrapping it all up together right here in this slide. The poor grade happens right there, or they didn't make the team. They have a different core belief. And their core belief is, I am lovable, period. Not when, not if. I am lovable, period. I am of worth, period. Not because mom says so, but because I say so. And this can come from a 5-year-old or a 55-year-old. It does not matter. It's about how we teach them to be that, right? Because of that core belief of just innate value, what happens is their automatic thoughts are, I have a place, that just wasn't it on that team. I'm great at a lot of things. I'll get them next time on that test. Or maybe this, just didn't my thing, so I'll just pass. I'll just do my best, right? And what that ends up doing holistically is they try something different. They're disappointed, but they're not depressed. And then they're able to maintain stability as opposed to riding the wave of the external stressors that are never, ever, ever stable. Does that make sense to everyone? The new self-talk is mistakes and disappointment happen, but I'm strong and I can survive them. I like myself. I'm worth something. And then we can, really what we're talking about is self-compassion. And we have to do it ourselves, which is the next slide. We have to show it and do it ourselves. That's, if we have self-compassion, do you see how mistakes are so easy? It doesn't excuse, it's not like we can go hurt everyone and go, oh, forgiven, right? But it is us being able to say, I can provide myself grace, and that's why it's so easy for that to be reciprocal.
On the topic of self-compassion, I printed off a few little things that I think go along with this, and it's like a self-care tag and self-care inventory to kind of help you guys assess, like, how do I do at taking care of myself? Or you can think of it from your kids' perspective. And then I love the phrase on this one. It says, sometimes we tend to the needs of our clothing more carefully than the needs of our emotional health. We separate colors, hand wash, hang dry, send certain items to the dry clean. But we don't do that for our own body and wellness. So if you guys would like to take these, it It'll help you just kind of integrate into your own personal, because you're taking in a lot of information. It may be hard to zone in for yourself right now, but how are we all doing in our self-compassion?
And we're gonna have, all of this will be posted, for sure, but really what we're talking about here, down, look at that bottom one. I can't tell you the number of times that someone's come into the counseling office and has said, you know, I feel so weak being in here. And and I'm talking about grown men often that have that out of their mouths, sitting there. And my response back is, you've never been stronger. You being vulnerable and feeling at your weakest is real and authentic, and you being real and authentic as opposed to having to mask it out there, that's not real, and that's actually the weak thing. You being real, authentic, and feeling vulnerable or broken or whatever it is, that's the strongest that you've ever been, period. And being able to teach our kids that, how cool of a community would we have, even cooler than we have now, if we all just lived very authentically.
I think we can go for it. I think what's most important is, this is again, just to reiterate, right? What's most important is us as a role model for our children. And then the next slide is, and the next one, but that was just my reminder to you guys, right? We can't pour from an empty cup, that how many of us have tried. I had someone in the office last week who said, you know, I hear that phrase that you can't pour from an empty cup. Girl, I don't know the last time I had a cup. Okay, that's where we're starting, right? That awareness is helpful.
And I'll throw in there, but that's where you can go, you know, if someone's saying, where do I take the strength out of this? You have a hand to hold it with,
Yeah.
right? At least you got that hand to hold it with at some point. Go ahead.
So this is for you guys, right? What does stand out as something that you learned today? Does anybody want to share out loud any responses to any of these end of training thoughts? This is our way of helping you integrate.
I have a couple of thoughts. One is that one of the first things I appreciate you, one of the things you said earlier is about the firing of cortisol all the time. And so our kids they're at school all day, and then after school they have activities, and so they're not downtime, which actually not really their downtime because they're on social media. And so therefore they're really firing all the time. And so that's one thing that I appreciate hearing to help manage my kids.
May I speak to that real
Yes,
fast?
please.
The Pediatric Association and Psychological Association says that more than 2 hours of screen time a day actually increases that cortisol and kills off brain cells. That's what they're talking about, and they are already getting that in tenfold at school.
Right.
Yeah. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but realizing that also it's good to rehear that, to recognize that again. But the other part is that, you know, we moved here 5 years ago, and our kids both got all A's except for one B, and they both got 89, their B's. And they were waiting for our reaction, but my reaction is that, wow, what a relief, because they made a mistake. Now you can relax and enjoy the rest. We don't want, we tell them that we don't want them to be the top of it. We want for them to be well balanced between school and, but again, and then we encourage our kids to make mistakes, because the sooner you make your mistakes, you will make mistakes. So the sooner you make your mistakes, you can move on. But having 2 kids with being perfectionists, and so the challenge for me is that how do we help our kids get to the point where you mentioned up on one of the few last slides here, is how do we help our kids get to the point where they are in that place where they are self-love, self-control to move on, right? Because we encourage our kids to not be the top of the class. We encourage our kids to make mistakes. But it's very challenging when they have that wanting to be perfect. And so, I'm not so sure there's really an answer. It's kind of a frustration actually.
There's such thing as extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation, right? And both of them have their place in our lives, but you're describing intrinsic motivation where a child they have that drive, right? And again, that's one of the things where you don't want to change too much of that because they're going to go a long way because of that. What you can do is be able to give them the tools to be able to say, my favorite quote of all time after a horrific baseball game, one of our co-coaches came up to the boys and looked at them and he said, well, the best thing about this is it's over. And that's all he said. That was the end of game speech. And I take that and I apply it to every biz, right? The best thing about that situation, that grade, the 89, is it's over. What do you want for dinner, right? And then that's how we move on. And that's what we can do. It's not taking away pain from our kids. It's just being there with them while they're experiencing it. And reminding them that whenever they are ready to feel something else, we're ready to move on with them.
If I may have another comment to that. We talk about stress with kids, but I also like to promote the fact that we as adults need to manage our stress. Because I didn't know about shingles until 3.5 years ago, and today I'm still taking pain medication. So shingle vaccines, you need to ask your doctor about it, because till today, half of my face is numb. And I found out I got shingles while we were on vacation, and I checked myself into the hospital. But today, I'm lucky that I'm not, my face didn't droop or anything like that. I take medication 3 times a day for pain management. But as adults, we're trying to manage our kids' stress, but we need to, like you said, we need to take care of ourselves before we can take care of our kids. I promise.
No, I love that. Yes, thank you. Anybody else? Thoughts, questions, reactions? Yes, sir.
So one thing, you had one bullet in there that said, I don't think you covered it, talked about the difference between males and females. So
Yeah.
I have 2 girls, and sometimes I find myself, and I grew up with sisters, but I think about how I thought as a boy, and I'm like, but they're girls. So, and they're very different. I've got one extrovert, one introvert. I got a 14-year-old that does the same thing. How's your day? Fine. Same thing. So but I find myself like, how do I distance my male brain from reacting to this? And then another question, how do I handle the mother-daughter dynamic? Which sometimes I'm like, what is this? Like, what is
go for
going
a long
on here?
walk.
Like, you guys just go in your corners and like, separate yourself? Like, what is this? I have no clue what that is.
I think that's very authentic.
Yeah. So I hand you our card for the second question. How do you handle it? Because that is definitely nuanced and it's special dynamics either way. I'll speak to the first one. You're welcome to speak to me also. But they're definitely, we are different, and each, you and I are different, for sure. We all have different personalities, but I will say that, and this is not something that was born into boys. I want to make that very clear. It's society-based. But when you think about it, every single child, period, is born with those 3 core emotions of sadness, fear, and joy. Those are the 3 core emotions. But what has society taught little boys in particular that they're allowed to feel? As they get a little bit older, when they're little, maybe all 3, but as they get a little bit older, they can feel happy, but then they're not allowed to feel afraid. And they're certainly not allowed to cry on the baseball field, right? And I'm one of the coaches of our boys teams, and I will literally say, Mikey, buddy, right now you're about to walk up to that plate. When we need a home run, we don't need tears. So get it together, man, and get mad, Mikey, right? Bust that ball, it will feel so much better. I'm part of it. But that's what we do for our boys. And we box males into a very, very small area of what they're allowed to feel. And it is no wonder that we have so many, I'm not necessarily talking about our little community, but in general, so many angry males. That's all that's allowed. Does that make sense? It's not that they were born that way. It's that that's what we have said you're allowed to be. And it's not natural. So, but it also means that when we are, all of this, besides the brain stuff, when we're born with a brain, all of this is created. Does that make sense? It's not a genetic thing, it's just created. So it can be changed also. So when you say, how do I change my responses? It's doing the same thing that I'm doing with Mikey. It's going back to a place of, I really do feel angry right now, and at the same time, what's underneath that? I'm feeling protective of my kids because I'm afraid, right? I don't want my girls to be hurt. I'm feeling sad because one of them got hurt, and I want to beat that kid up that hurt my daughter, right? But it's finding that place that naturally then de-escalates us, and it's moving into that emotion that she may be feeling. Same emotion, it just didn't start the same way. Is that?
It does, and I think also men and women approach things differently.
Sure.
I get that, but there's certain times that my style is better than my wife's is, and vice versa, right? But I think what's interesting is when you observe in your own kids your own behavior, and then you're criticizing your kids for your own behavior, and you're like talking in the mirror. But I've also found, so in your situation, your 14-year-old daughter, I've started driving, they're both in middle school, I've started driving them to school every morning, and it's 10 minutes, we don't live that far away. But I just asked them about their day, and like I could ask my daughter at the end of the day, what did you do? Nothing. It was fine, right? But then in the day, it's like, so do you have a test? I'm like, oh, Dad, we studied U.S. history, and I wrote about how, they were fighting for representation in the Stamp Act, and just like sharing, like, where did this come from? And just like, it's a 5-minute snapshot. I've learned is let them talk on their own time. And sometimes my wife will try things out when they're not ready. I'm like, you're going to try to draw some blood from a stone, but it's not going to work, right? So I've just kind of learned to let them pick their moments. But I share that because for me, I do have more of the type A, and I'm like trying to push them to achieve, and they don't have that. They're not driven the same way. And my mom said something to me. She said, "You parent the child that you have, not parenting the child that you wish that you had." And I think maybe that's a thing I was guilty of doing before. It's been interesting because I've learned as much from them maybe as I've tried to teach them. So I think you learn and you grow with them. But it's been interesting as I see them get older. Now as a dad, particularly as they're girls, and you're like, what can I do to help them to achieve whatever they want to do in their life, but just to be well-adjusted and successful. So it's kind of a different relationship, I feel. And I made the comment about mother-daughter fighting because I'm like, as long as they're talking to one of us, it's okay, right? Having that relationship is important. So there is that communication. And there could be periods where they don't want to talk to me, and that's fine. That's just kind of what I've observed. But it is different because I do find sometimes thinking about things from a male point of view. And with my older one, it works. With my younger one, she's like my wife, and like the two of them clash. I'm like, whoa, this is too much estrogen in the house. So
that's why community is so important. That's whether it's a partner in the household or groups like this, or trusted friends that we can align with. You talk about you get more from your kids than they get from you. That's why I love presenting. It's not because I like standing up here and talking. It's because I always get more from y'all. I always get more from artists than I think what comes out of my mouth. That every single time I learn and grow from experiences like this. So that's why we're here, and I know that's why y'all are here, because we want community. We don't want to feel alone doing this, and we want new ideas from each other. So thank you for sharing that, and everyone else that did. And if anyone had any further questions or anything, please, they're part of this. I'm so not technology. I don't even know how to make my phone connect to this thing. That's how bad it is. I read a lot, but I don't know how to turn on our TV. That's how bad it is. I kid you not. All of that said, if y'all can figure this thing out, one of the things on here is to give us feedback, to let us know what was helpful, to let us know information for the future that we can take back to our group, to the committee, and bring forward for future presentations and topics. But if y'all also have specific questions for either one of us, we want to do this with you guys. We get just as much from y'all's experiences. We're learning and growing too, and we appreciate y'all being a part of that with us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for taking this. You took a couple hours of your weeknights that are filled and busy to be here, which shows so much about the love that you have for your kids and the desire to support them. So thank you guys for being here.
Big applause.
put on the website, and Ms. Webb will send out a link with that. But also, if you have any questions, you can reach out to your campus counselor. And then, just as a reminder, we also have the Children's Telebehavioral Health that is available for free for families. And if you have questions about that, the counselor on your child's campus can help with that too. So, but Artis and Sarah, thank you very much for coming out.
I'm gonna put these back here so if you
sharing
guys
this
wanna
with
get
us.
one of it.
I know some of the Artis's cards were up here, so if you're in the back, you might not have received Artis's card. But if you want them, there are some up here on the chairs too. But thank you all, and let us know if y'all need anything. Okay, thank you. Thank you, guys.